Welcome back. This is segment 2 of Citizens Forum being filmed on Tuesday, February the 2nd. Our guest in this segment is Chris Cook. And Chris, you're a media empire, so why don't you... Radio?
Yeah, radio and online too, yeah. As an empire, I think I'm going the way of the American empire. I mean, not making
overvalued dollar, you mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, the fiat dollar. Yeah, I've been doing radio at CFUV, and I got to get a plug in because next month in March is CFUV's annual fundraising. This is the University of Victoria radio station. It's been going. This is, I think, the 30th anniversary of the station. You know, being up there, run by volunteers. You know,
yeah,
almost entirely. Yeah. And doing great stuff, great music, great public affairs stuff that you don't get, you know, otherwise.
No, you sure don't. You don't. It's. I wish CFUV was bigger and broader, better known, and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, 2,300 watts is what the station puts out, and if you want to put that in context, you know, some of the rock and roll stations, 50,000 or even 100,000 watts.
So it's the signal's difficult
watts,
to
yeah,
pick up.
Once you get over the Malahat, you know, it starts fading out. But it's online, so we have a global reach. This is the amazing thing about communications. When I started in 1998 at CFUV, we didn't have computers. At least there was no like internet connection or anything like that. I used to go and get newspapers, you know, physical newspapers, and read newspapers in the morning and make radio copy to do little radio features like the old-fashioned way, right? Now we're on the internet. We get people listening to us all over the world, you know.
Well, especially a show like yours, because you deal with the issues of the world. Not
yeah,
local.
my show's a lot about global, you know,
so
the
do you
sexy
have an
international kind of stuff.
are you out there online?
Oh yeah, sure.
Oh,
yeah,
good,
sure.
good.
And on my own website too, Pacific Free Press, I upload to that site as well as at Simon Fraser. They've picked up the show as well.
And on international news, Pacific Free Press has great stuff. You know, a constant flow of it.
Yeah, it's an aggregate site. I don't write as much as I used to, but I get good stories from all over, from authors that I actually go out. I don't just grab people's articles. I've made arrangements with all these various prominent journalists, and they allow me to feature their stuff. I can't pay. I mean, there's no money in it, but yeah, like the Huffington Post, only better.
Yes, PacificFreePress.com.
That's it.
So
yeah.
Taseko and Western
slap
Canada,
suits, right? I mean, a lot of people,
suits.
you know, slap suits have been a bit of a topic lately, and
I guess I have to say, I think I've got a slap suit filed against me by the company that is involved in the Shawnigan Lake site, shall we call it.
Is it actually a suit or a threat of a suit?
No, I think it is actually a suit.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, it's strategic lawsuit against public participation, SLAPP, is what SLAP is. And it started in the United States where, you know, they're famously litigious down there. And these suits were brought by big corporations, generally, and vested interests against small, you know, environmental groups or political groups, people that were saying things they didn't like, and they're using defamation. But basically, they brought the suits because they had deep pockets and they could, not necessarily because they thought they could win, or even if they even believed that they'd been defended. Well, yeah, it puts a chill out there, and these people then they spend, you know, these little organizations spend all their resources, you know, fighting this supposed, you know, suit that might end up getting thrown out, but it's crushed this organization, and everyone else looks at it and thinks, oh, geez, I'm not going to talk about Corporation X, you know, I'll suffer the same fate, you know. And they will, you know, in a lot of cases. I started doing them, you know, years ago out here with the Silver Spray development in East Souk, and there was a suit brought against a few guys out there that were opposed to this, you know, what they said would change the whole character of East Souk by bringing in dozens and dozens of these big luxury homes and a marina and all these other stuff. So a suit was brought by the developer against some of these local guys, and it was a real big issue out there, and some of these guys didn't come back into activism after it because, you know, they were looking at losing their houses, and, you know, and it divides communities, puts a lot of stress within families and marriages, and, you know, they break up, you know, they're pernicious. And there was a law in British Columbia, the first in Canada, against slap suits that was brought in by the NDP naturally. in 2001, and it survived exactly 3 or 4 months and was repealed. You know,
by the NDP?
No, the Liberals, when they got in 2001, they.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the NDP brought it in at the very end of their...
Right.
Isn't that so typical of the NDP?
Well, I don't want to criticize.
Last
I mean, I know how
week
difficult these things are.
Yeah, right.
But it went down the toilet. Well, now the big news is now that a lot of people know the Wilderness Committee. They're BC based, but they're broader than that. They have been sued by the Taseko mines about the Fish Lake. I don't know if you remember the Fish Lake. You know,
can you just say where it is?
It's up in the interior of British Columbia, far up in the north interior, by 300 kilometers from Williams Lake, south.
Yeah, and there was going to be a mine that was going to destroy the lake.
Gold and copper. Taseko wanted to go in there, and it was the most outrageous thing I'd ever heard of. At least their plan was, and Fish Lake is what we call it. It's Tetzlan-Bini is what, pardon the pronunciation, is what it was traditionally called by the first peoples that live up there. It's a sacred lake to them, of course, and it provides their sustenance. You know, it has for forever. The idea was that Taseko was going to come and drain the lake, but not to worry, because they were going to dig a big hole somewhere else and make a second lake and put all the fish, presumably, and everything else in the other lake, so that the First Nations could still fish and have their way of life. And then they would, from the middle of Fish Lake, would put a gold and copper mine, because at the bottom of the lake was where they figured that's where the lode was. Well, there was a lot of opposition to it. The First Nations didn't like the idea to begin with, and Wilderness Committee and a lot of other, you know, environmental groups came out and said, well, this is, not only is it like a stupid, you know, I mean, it's an insult to the intelligence, really, to think that everything's going to be fine after all this hugely disruptive project. Well, Taseko brought a lawsuit against them. Now, the word slap, I don't know, I might get sued for saying it was a slap suit, but it you know, it walked like a duck and it quacked like a duck, and, you know, it looked like a slap suit. But so just last week, the suit was settled. And in the decision, well, I'll tell you something. The lawyer, Taseko's lawyer, his name is Roger McConkie, or McConkie is close enough. And he says the claims in this case are put forward on the basis of inferential meaning that would convey to the average ordinary reader as a matter of impression. Now, what he's saying there is, like Joe Blow, you or me that didn't know anything, if they heard this on the news or read it, you know, in a flyer, they would think badly of Taseko. It says it would create an impression that a person that didn't have special knowledge would infer badly for. Special knowledge is not really defined in the thing that I read. Well, the justice, Supreme Court Justice Gordon Funt, now he awarded special costs to the Wilderness Committee, and he blasted Taseko. Now, he didn't say the word slap. That's, I think, too politically charged. But he did rule. He says, in the context of a defamation action, seeking punitive damages may serve to silence critics. Well, that's, of course, exactly what a slap suit is all about. Silencing your critics and scaring the bejesus out of anybody else who might, you know, have the temerity to speak up. Well, he says, in this case, does Justice Funt, seeking damages was an economic threat. So he finds that Taseko, have to pick up the costs after a certain point in the Wilderness Committee's legal costs.
So they have to pay.
They have to pay. So they're paying,
Committee.
in essence, a penalty for bringing this suit. Now, that's what the slap suit legislation was all about. It was that you couldn't bring this suit and put all these people through all this ordeal, financial and mental anguish, and then just walk away. Oh, well, we lost. Okay. There had to be a penalty that would dissuade people from abusing the courts. And this is using the court system that we pay for as well, which is already overburdened. But so Justice Funt said something great. He goes, well, the public is neither a sheep nor a parrot. A reasonable and ordinary member of the public would view that the Wilderness Committee statements were comment as part of a freewheeling debate that engaged jobs, the environment, the economy, and First Nations. Now, this is fair comment. This is like when you on this show or Walter or any of your guests, they say, well, it's my opinion that, you know, this is that. You don't have to hold them to a standard of being an expert or have them show the camera, you know, a website that, you know, a journalist cited it. I mean, people are allowed to have opinions in our society, at least, up till now.
Yeah.
But and this is the judge ruled, and this he ruled was something that Taseko had crossed the line and had to pay for it. So now, of course, the Wilderness Committee is overjoyed, but they also say, great, now let this be a first step towards bringing back SLAPP legislation so that other corporations, maybe like what's going on in Shawnigan Lake, can't use the court as a bludgeon against fair comment.
The courts are one of the few places we have left, and I just hope we don't lose them because, I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but, in so many instances, it's the courts, the Supreme Court or a lower level court that is doing what the public wants, while the government has been totally corrupted. I'm sure the corporations know this, and they're probably sitting in the boardrooms right now saying, okay, how do we get control of the courts too?
Well, we see our American friends, their judiciary is politicized. A lot of judges are elected, a lot of district attorneys are elected. So not necessarily on the merit of their standing in the legal community or anything like that. They can just run a campaign, get their dirty reds. I'll be the toughest guy on whatever,
right.
Muslims or whoever the enemy du jour is, and that's enough to get them in a position that they're not really qualified for. But the effect is it politicizes the judiciary. Thankfully, in Canada, the judiciary is separated. But Mr. Harper, when he was trying like hell to emulate again the Americans and to politicize our judiciary, and he took runs at the judiciary, saying that they were like using these buzzwords that we're familiar with from the States, like activist judges and so forth, trying to put pressure on judges, or mandatory minimum sentencing for certain crimes, which takes all of the a judge's authority and discretion out of a case, which, essentially neuters,
Chris, we're out of time. Thank you very much for both those stories, or all those stories.
There's more.
Yeah. Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.